Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and violin tutor. If the violin is shaking when you're trying to do vibrato, that is the number one sign that you are attempting vibrato too soon. Number one, the first thing you're going to need is a violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 4 years old. I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music.
With the amazing talent that's Alison Sparrow. Alison, come out here.
So bear with me if there are any technical hitches, I'm sure it'll be fine. For about 5 years I was an examiner for the London College of Music. And over the years I've seen basically the music world from every kind of possible view really, and because of that it has enabled me to write my own violin course. Hello everyone, welcome. So there we go, that's kind of all you really need to know. And don't forget guys, anyone can learn to play the violin. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another live Friday at 5 live video. So in today's video we are going to be talking about how to improve your intonation, which is a very important part of playing the violin. But as usual, let me all know in the chat where you are from and I'll say a quick hello and shout out to you during the live. And before we all get started, as usual, you all know the drill by now, but I do have a 1 to 30 violin course, which is 100% downloadable. The course is priced at $59.99 US, which is very affordable. The first 10 lessons are absolutely free. All the information is going to be underneath the video, and I know most of you watching have already started my course or been on the course, and if you haven't and you're looking for something to get going with, then why not try my course? So today we are going to be talking about intonation and how to improve your intonation. I'm just going to move the chat box this way just so I can have a look. Sorry, bear with me a second. This is just poor preparation on my part. Okay, so bear with me 1 second. I've just forgot to pop the chat out. Sorry, 1 second. Slight technical glitch going on here. Almost there. Let's put that in and apply, and we'll put you in there, and now I can see all of the chat. So sorry about that everyone. Right, who have we got? Hello Loretta from Canada, someone from Crewe, Sue, hello again, it's nice to see you. It's nice to see actually the same or similar people week in, week out, so that's all very nice. So nice to see you all again, and thank you for joining me. So first thing we're going to talk about is how to improve your intonation. The first and foremost most important thing is to make sure you've got an in-tune violin. The amount of maybe not so much with my own students, because I try and train them to do this from a very early age, but a lot of students on the internet, or a lot of people will ask the question on the internet, and so I'm talking about kind of you guys more than anything else, but always make sure that your violin is in tune. If your strings are not in tune, you're never going to be able to do anything. It's always going to be a problem, because if your strings are not perfectly in tune, then every time you put a first finger down, it's not going to be in the right place, is it? Because your open A string, for example, isn't going to be an open A. It's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be making the sound of a G sharp or a B flat or a B, or something else, whatever your string is tuned to. So you really ought to be tuning your violin at the start of every session. So absolutely make sure your violin is tuned before the start of every session. You may not need to tune it. I don't always need to tune my violin, to be honest, at the start of every session, because my violin doesn't go out of tune. But if yours does go out of tune, if you've got one of those more student sort of quality violins, just make sure that your violin is in tune. Okay, now the second thing that I'm going to say is to help with your intonation is to add in some dots. So I have put a link to a video underneath this video already on how to put some dot placement or how to place the dots on your violin. So I'm going to put some dots on my violin now so you can see me do it in real time, but I'm not going to go into too much detail with that because I've already got a video that's literally right underneath there, and I've linked some dots for those of you that are in the UK to buy from Amazon, and in the US as well, but you can get them from wherever you want really. These are the dots you need. I've even put the precise measurement of the dots that you'll need as well. But suffice to say that you can use whatever you want to use really. You can use, if you don't have any dots to hand and you don't want to get these, then you can use the stickers that you get from when you print labels on anything like that. You can cut into a little square or something and you want to place it in. So I've obviously used all my red ones up, but color is your preference, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to place the first dot. Now I place dots on the first finger and I place them on the third finger. So if you follow my course, I do tell you why I do this, but I also explain it in the video where that I've linked underneath, where I am talking about exactly where to place the dots. So what I do is I'll just pluck the open A string. My violin is perfectly in tune. I'll pluck the open A string, and then I'll just put my first finger down where it needs to go. And then I will put the first finger dot just in there like that, roughly in the middle. So I know that when I put my first finger down now, that gives me a B, and that's perfect. What I'm going to do is go for, I don't know, a green dot next. Doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is place my third finger down. So I'm going to put the placement of my third finger, which is there, and then I'm just going to put the dot. And there we have, I've got the first finger and the third finger. Now the reason why I don't like putting any other dots in is because you don't need it. I think you can get a little bit lazy when you start doing that as well, so I don't think you need to do that. So you only need the first finger and you only need the third finger. You don't need anything with the second finger, because the second finger is either going to go jammed in right next to the third finger, or the second finger is going to go right next door to the first finger. You've already got the placement for the first, so it slips in there. You've already got the placement for the third, so that slips in there. It isn't going to go anywhere else. It is either going to go right next door to the first, or it is going to go jammed in right next door to the third. And then with the fourth finger, again, you don't need that, because the fourth finger is either going to be, if I put the third down, it's either going to be, again, jammed in right next to the third finger, or it's going to be almost like a little finger's sort of gap apart, and it's going to be there. So I don't really feel like you need the dots there. You don't need those dots, because I feel like you should get to learn the feel of where those other fingers need to go. Otherwise, I think you become too dependent on having too many dots and lines. So you can get those don't fret stickers. Now, back in the day when I first started my channel, and these videos that I've done are very, very popular, only because they're a good 10 years or so old now, so lots of people have watched them, but I used to advocate the use of those don't fret stickers. Now, they're okay, they're great, but I really just don't think you need them. You've got to pay for those. They're, I don't know, back in the day, I think they were about £5, $6, $7, something like that. Whereas most people have got something like this kicking about the house, or, you know, next time you're at a stationer's, it would probably be more expensive to get them on Amazon because you're paying for the delivery. So if you pop into your local stationery or wherever, and a supermarket, Asda, something like that, they'll sell things like this, and you can probably pick them up for £1 or £2. So what you'll find is that you'll just need to replace these dots every so often, just because your fingers will get a little bit sweaty, and then they will just sort of start to come off. So that is the use, that is putting the dots and how you're going to use them. So when you are putting your fingers down, you can now make sure that your fingers are going exactly where they need to go. The other thing about placing the dots on the fingerboard is that some teachers like to teach that, i.e. me, and some teachers don't like to teach that way because they feel like their students become dependent on the dots. My theory behind that is that it's fine if you're starting out and you're learning for the first year or so, or, you know, for the first little while of your violin playing. There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that at all. I don't like it when people use those dots kind of beyond that when you don't really need them, but when you're first starting out, it's absolutely fine to do that. But how do your fingers know if you didn't have any dots there? How would your fingers, or how would your ear or brain or whatever know that your third finger is in the right place if you don't know what the sound of that third finger is? So if your first finger can always go down correctly every single time, your third finger goes down every single time, second finger correctly every single time, then your brain and your ears can start to associate that, and you start to learn where those fingers are supposed to go. But if you take the dots away and your teacher is making you do that without the dots, I just think you're going to have a hard time of it, because how can you learn what you don't know or what you can't really hear? You're doing a lot. It gets really frustrating, and you're doing a lot of fumbling around in the dark. So there is nothing wrong with using the dots. I've been teaching like that for years, for 2 decades. None of my students have ever had a problem with it and ever come a cropper with it. When we've come to remove the dots, it's always been done so at the perfect time, and nobody's ever had a problem with intonation. So don't be afraid of using the dots. That's my opinion behind it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let's have a look at the chat and see if anyone has any questions. A few hellos. Hi from Honduras. Wow. Hello. Chris from Dorset. Hi, nice to have you here. Okay, got a question. AB says, when I put the dots on 2 to 3 weeks, they slip down on me, but luckily I've got used to the position every now, and then I use the tuner just to check the position again. Yeah, well that's where having a sheet of these comes in quite handy, because I just said that those dots will move and they will slide down just because I think that the glue loosens. If you feel like the dots are just getting a bit manky, just take them off and just put some new ones on. They're great as well because they're sticky enough to do what they need to do, but they're not so sticky that they're going to leave any residue. When you do take them off and they do leave a little bit of a residue, it isn't going to damage the violin. Just sort of use your finger and sort of rub the residue of the glue off and it'll be fine. But yeah, don't let those dots get too sweaty with the hands and let them move, because then you're no better than not using any dots at all. So make sure they're staying in the right place. Okay, IGM Cat says, can you keep the third or fourth finger down without having the first or second finger down as well? Just curious. Yes, of course you can. You only need the finger down, or the note down, of the one that we're being told to play. So for example, if you wanted a D, let's say you wanted to play a D on the A string, doesn't matter what the rest of my fingers are doing. The rest of my fingers could be doing a little dance in the air. It doesn't really matter. Nobody cares, because, just hit the microphone there. Hope that wasn't a huge noise. You're only going to hear this sound. So you can have all these down. Most of the time people do have these down because you've either just played, a B, a C, and then a D, and then the next note is going to be a C, and then the next note after that is going to be a D, and then a C, and then a B, or something like that. So it's easy to keep the fingers down. You wouldn't just have that finger down and then have your fingers, the rest of them, poking around in the air, because you're going to be using them quite soon after. But yes, you don't have to have them down if you don't want to. For example, when I am doing vibrato and I want to play a D and I'm doing vibrato, then obviously my fingers, well, they're a little bit closer to the fingerboard, but when I do vibrato, obviously nothing is touching the board. I can't do vibrato with all my fingers down on here anyway. It doesn't really work. So, but when I am playing, I will keep them down just because it's easier to do that, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So that was a very long-winded way of saying no. Yes, Sue has jumped the gun here, saying scales can help your intonation. So yes, moving on. So scales is practicing scales and arpeggios is an excellent way to work on intonation. It's probably the best way to work on intonation. After you've made sure your violin is tuned and then you've got the dots in, just go with the dots. Trust me, it will excel your learning and it won't be detrimental to your playing at all. The next thing you can do is play scales and arpeggios, and they're very, very good for intonation because everything moves in a step position. Open string, first finger, second finger, third finger, open string, first finger, second finger, and everybody knows the sound of a scale, don't they? It's not like a piece of music where you might not know the song particularly and you're not quite familiar with it, so you don't know if that next note that you've got your finger down on is the correct one. Everybody knows what the sound of a scale is like. So, for example, if you are following, for those of you who are following my course, maybe you're there yet or you've gone past it. If you're on lessons 11 to 20 in book 2, when you move on to lesson 11, we talk about scales. The scales that I've specifically chosen here are the type of scales that will go hand in hand with the exact level that you're going to be at this very point in the book. So I do go through some of the scales that you've got here. There are loads and loads more scales that you can do, but I've got some scales in book 3 as well, but I think it is, yes, lessons 11. Oh yes, there's some arpeggios on here as well on page 7. So we've got some, we've got a few more scales there, and some arpeggios are later on in the book. So there are some scales if you are following my course, because they are very, very important to do. As I always say, if you can play your scales and arpeggios, you can play any piece of music that you want. But scales are particularly good to do because they make you learn the intonation. So and so on. So if you work through them really slowly, don't ever worry about the sound of the scales. So we're not particularly, if we're working on intonation, particularly with our fingers, we're not worried about the sound of the scales. So don't really worry about what the bow is doing. We can always sort that out later on down the line. But the first thing we want to do is make sure that our fingers are being placed exactly on the dot. So if we're doing a scale of D, we're doing our open D. I'm just going to turn the microphone down just a touch. And then I'm going to make sure that my first finger is going on that orange dot that I've got there. Now the next note in the scale of D is an F sharp. And we know that an F sharp is right next door to where the third finger So it isn't here. Our F sharp is there. So I'm going to put my finger down just slightly behind the green dot. And I know that's going to be an F sharp. And it is. And I know it is because my violin is perfectly in tune. This is what I was talking about earlier. If your violin is not in tune, then none of these notes are going to be in tune. And then you're just wasting your time because you're training your ear all wrong. Then when you put your third finger down, make sure that's down on the dot. Next one is open A anyway. Next one is on that orange dot. The next one is a C sharp, so I'm going to place it just behind the green. And then the last one is on the green. So that is a perfectly in tune scale of D major. And you want to do that with all of your scales. But when you are learning intonation, use this and a much slower speed to really understand where those fingers are going. Really slow the scale down and make it very, very purposeful. Okay, let's move on. So playing along to backing tracks is another idea that you can do to help you with intonation. So backing tracks will help you build up a better sense of pitch, as poor intonation is really just going to stick out like a sore thumb, isn't it? So if you are playing to a piano backing track, or I don't know, anything besides a drum track, really, if you're obviously playing to a drum track, then it is just a drum track. You want something instrumental that you can play to. So wherever you want to get your backing tracks from, it's always a good idea to play to a backing track, because then you will be able to hear whether your intonation doesn't sound right or not. Okay. Sue says I'm having a hard time doing melodic scales. When you mean melodic scales, do you mean the scales that that change on the way, that are different on the way down than they're on the way up? Let me know if you're still watching, Sue, and then I'll answer you a little bit later on. IGM Cat, I hope I'm pronouncing this your name right. Apologies if not. Can you show a close-up of the part of your finger that stops the string? I sound like I'm strangling something. My open strings sound fine, but sounds squeaky when I'm stopping a string. So that could be that you are... Generally, the sound is going to be coming from the bow. So I wonder whether that is more of a case of your pressure is too much. You're putting too much pressure down. I mean, if I show you a close-up of my finger on the string, there isn't really kind of anything to sort of see. I'm not really doing anything clever. Even if this finger here is actually is touching the E string. So I'm aiming to put a first finger on the A string at the moment, but my finger is touching the E string. So if I'm aiming to touch the A string, let's just say, and my finger is my finger is over the E string unintentionally or not. Now if I play an E string, I mean, it still works because my finger is over it, but it isn't as nice as if I was purposefully putting my finger on that string. So I think you just want to aim to have the pad of your finger as much as possible over the string. Seeing my finger on the string, I don't think you're really going to gain anything, because I think probably what you're doing is that your bow isn't accurate enough. So maybe you're not isolating the string enough. So maybe have a look at what the bow is doing, and then make sure that the finger is pressing down nice and firm as well. If your finger isn't nice and firm, then you're going to get a sound like this. So if I lighten off the pressure, you're then more in harmonic territory. If I press down, if I lighten up, I get sort of a bit of a kind of a wispy half-bar sound, really, because my finger is not fully on the string. So you don't need to press those fingers down loads. Just put a good amount of pressure on there. If you're putting too much, so you're almost just trying to push your finger through the fingerboard, you're going to end up with so much tension in the left hand, and then that's going to lead to other problems down the line. Okay, I see some questions here. So Chris says, luckily I love playing scales. I love playing scales too. I don't know why students don't like playing scales. Scales are everything, because or I used to know when I was younger that if I could do all of my scales and arpeggios, I knew I could pretty much play whatever piece I wanted to play, because every single piece of music ever written in the world is made up of scales and arpeggios. So obviously I'm talking about all 36 scales and arpeggios. So if you can do all of them very, very well, then a piece of music is really essentially just a muddled up version of a scale. So you're always going to be a much, much, much more advanced, much more particular, much more articulate, a much more skilled musician, violinist. It goes for every instrument. You're just going to be much more skilled if you can do your scales and arpeggios, and they will help you with all the intonation and everything anyway. Okay. 777 truth, light pressure equals strangling something. Yeah, but again, don't put so much pressure on it that you're really giving it some claw hand, because then you're just going to end up with so much tension. So just a good amount of pressure, not too light that you're going to get that wispy sound. If you get that kind of wispy sound, then just put a little bit more pressure down, but not so much pressure that you're trying to push, you're trying to push the string through the fingerboard. We don't really want to be doing that. Let's answer one more. Earl Dean, could you please explain your violin course? I'm a little confused. I love your YouTube videos and watch you all the time. Why, thank you. I'm a beginner and I want to follow your course. Okay, very quickly, I did, actually, let me show you in the beginning again. I can show you this. So my course consists of 6 books, or five books actually, 30 lessons. They will teach you the violin from complete scratch, and they guarantee to take you to a good, decent, accomplished intermediate player. So my 1 to 30 course is everything you need to get going on the violin. The first 10 lessons are absolutely free, so you've got nothing to lose with that. So my course will cover everything from reading music, more advanced stuff, lots of techniques, sight reading. You're putting me on the spot here. I'm trying to think of everything, all of your technical stuff that you need, but it will teach you everything from scratch, completely from the beginning, and it guarantees, this is the key part, my course guarantees to take you from that beginner to a very decent, accomplished intermediate player. My course is the culmination of around about 25 years of teaching. I've been a musician since I was 4 years old when I first started. So it's a culmination of me being a musician and all of my years of teaching, and I've just put all of my teachings into 30 lessons so that it will take you to a good, decent intermediate player. So any more details you want to know, write them in the comments and I will reply to you privately or separately after this video. But have a look, there are links underneath this video of where you can start, and the first 10 lessons are absolutely free. So to be quite frank, you've got absolutely nothing to lose. All you need for the first 10 lessons are just a violin and a bow and the will to want to do it. Everything else is free that you'll need to get you going, but I guarantee by the time you get to lesson 10 you're going to want to move on to the rest of the course. So yes, I hope that has helped you. Sue, do you have an advanced course? No, I don't have an advanced course, and I won't have an advanced course. It doesn't really work that way. Once you get to a point where one has learned everything they need to know on the violin. So for example, that would be all, if not most, of the scales. Every time you see a piece of sheet music, you know exactly what everything means. You know what this symbol means, you know what these numbers mean, you know what this means, you know what that number means, you know what that note is, you know how many beats that note. Every dot, dash, mark, line, whatever you see on here as far as a piece of sheet music goes, once you've got to that point where there's nothing physically more, technically more for the eyes to learn, nothing more to learn, then you start getting into the more advanced realms where it is then more like masterclassy type teaching. So it is more based on the individual to push the music or to push that musician a little bit further, and it's less about learning what is on the music, i.e. the slurring and the notes and all that kind of thing, because you'll be able to do all those techniques by then. It's more about pushing the music to the next level. So it's more about how you are interpreting the music rather than just looking at the music and the dynamic says play it soft, play it loud, go a bit softer here, go a little bit louder there, play it like this, play it like that. Instead of just following the music, it's about really interpreting the music and interpreting how the composer would Tchaikovsky have wanted you to play Swan Lake. And it's almost like you're putting your heart and soul into it after that. And that isn't something I can just bottle up and put in a lesson. So that's why I haven't done that, and that's why you won't find that on anybody's course, because it doesn't. It's very unique to the individual at that point. Okay, let's move on with a few more. So I seem to say this every single week, but record yourself. Nobody likes recording themselves, but recording yourself is just a great way to teacher yourself. When you don't have anyone like me, or you don't have a real teacher that you're going to, anything like that, record yourself. Everybody has ears, and I know that you are still beginners, and the whole point is that you don't know when. A lot of people say they don't know when to move on and when they're ready to move on, but you do generally have an idea of if you sound rubbish or not, if you feel rubbish. I would always move on when I felt that I sounded pretty good. Whether I did sound pretty good or not, I don't know, but that's all part of progressing. But I would never move on when I knew I sounded absolutely rubbish. I would move on when I thought I don't know what else to do. I've exhausted everything now. I need to move on to the next stage, learn a little bit more, and then maybe I can come back to that particular piece or whatever it was I was working on and apply my new skills and get even better. And that's kind of cumulatively how it works. So if you record yourself, you'll be able to hear yourself playing backwards and hear yourself back, and then you'll be able to hear whether you sound completely atrocious and whether some of your notes are in tune or they're not in tune. But it is one of the best ways to teach yourself when you don't have access to a teacher, or you're not, you're teaching yourself online or something like that. Practice slowly and deliberately. So I did a little bit of that earlier when I was doing the scales. Now, again, a lot of people don't like practicing slowly and deliberately because it's really boring, and it is really boring, but it is such good practice. It teaches you, what's the word I'm looking for? Word has gone completely out of my head. It's very good to keep you on track. It teaches you discipline. That's the word I was looking for, discipline. So it's very, very good discipline to play things slowly rather than playing things fast, because when we play things fast, we're not really listening to what we're doing. I mean, how much of that was really accurate? Don't know, because it was all over before I had a chance to really think about what I was doing. But if I'm playing it like this, and so on and so forth. When I'm playing it like that, what's actually going through my mind is every time I play a note and put my finger down, I'm always thinking to myself, is it going down to the right place? Is it going down to the right place? Put it down in the right place. Yes, it's in the right place. If I can see it's in the right place, I know 100% that note is in the right place and it is going to play me the exact note I want it to play. Now, when you're playing really quickly, because you don't have that skill of where your fingers are going to be going quite just yet, that's where your intonation is going to go to complete pot. So you need to train yourself to put your fingers in the right place. Now, if you've done that dozens and dozens and trillions and billions of times, playing really intentionally slowly, your fingers are going to know exactly where they need to go. Then you can speed that up, and then your fingers will just know. People will often say, guitarists will actually say this comment, but people will often say, how do you know where to put your fingers on the violin? Because there's no frets on the violin. So the guitarist will look at a violin and think there's no frets there and think that it's really difficult, but you just know. You know because you started off by putting in the dots, and you also know because you've trained yourself very slowly. Doing everything slowly and deliberately is part of being a classical musician, because nothing can be swept under the rug. Everything has to be just so perfect, perfectionist, OCD, it's all of those kind of traits. Okay, I've got one more little tip that we can do to improve the intonation. I'm just going to go over to the chats. John says, thanks for taking the time to do another live lesson. You are very welcome. I quite enjoy doing these lives, actually. I think they're very well interactive, and I like chatting to you guys as well. Oh, what's this? Anne Mulray. To those who have purchased Alison's violin course, I promise you that Learn to Play the Violin Book 1 will really solidify your understanding and knowledge about a lot of things. Oh, stop it, you. Thank you. I'm glad that you like the course. Violin aspirations. I'd like to join your course. Just head to the link underneath and just head towards where it says you'll see. Head to the link underneath, and then you'll want to click on the Start Here sheet, the Start Here PDF, and that will tell you exactly what you need to do. And you can join any time. It isn't like a course that's run at a certain time. It's just whenever you want to join the course, it's your course, and then you can go at it in your own time whenever you like. Have we got anything else? Ron says, I'm 2.5 years into her course and it does what it says. Thank you, Ron. I'm glad that it does. Can you do a video on sight reading? Yes, I can do a video on sight reading. Leave it with me. I might do that for next week's video. So yes, I can definitely do that. And Mr. Devon Walker, what are your thoughts on tuning with a vibration-based tool versus a sound-based tuning tool? Do you mean a violin tuner? I think I might have one in here. Hold on. Are you sort of referring to one of these that you would put on the violin? This one goes on. Hang on, let me just put that on. So this one goes on the violin like this. Are you referring to that as well as opposed to, or tuning it to a piano or something like that? I think these works great. This is the D'Addario NS Micro Tuner. These are great tuners and they're nice. This does, let me see if I can switch it on. Yep. Actually, you can't actually see anything on it because it is not attached to the violin. So these are good because I like these because these sit on the violin here. I'm not so much of a fan of the guitar ones that do tune on here because I feel like they are... Some of them can be slightly inaccurate. So this one is pretty good, I think, because it is a good tuner. It isn't the cheapest of tuner, but it is a good tuner and it sits on the violin here. So it picks up, it is a vibration-based tuner, but it picks up the vibrations that are on the body. The guitar tuners on the other ones that you get, the clip-on ones, for example, they go on here and I don't feel like you get good vibrations from coming up there. It's almost as if the vibrations are the most powerful there. It's like if you put your finger in water or rippled some water, the ripples would sort of get less and bigger the further out you sort of go. So I don't feel the vibrations are quite as accurate as they are much closer or on the body of the violin. But suffice to say that if you've got one of those, they're going to be as accurate as you need them to be anyway. So I really wouldn't worry. What was the name of it again? I'll see if I can put a link to it. This is quite an old one now. I'll see if I can put a link to it or something similar, or the next one up from this, or whatever it is. But it is the D'Addario NS Micro Tuner. But again, you might not be able to get a hold of this. Yes, Ron, thank you. You might not be able to get a hold of this. So I will put a link. If you bear with me after this video, I'll put a link to this, or the closest thing to this that I possibly can when we're done. And I've just dropped it on the floor. Never mind. So the final thing that I was going to talk about was be careful with vibrato. So I don't know how many of you watching this or will be watching this are actually doing vibrato, but be very careful with vibrato and intonation, especially if you're starting out. Now, the reason why a lot of people don't talk about this, or a lot of teachers don't talk to you about this, but the reason why is that, let me do the third finger, for example, because then I can put it directly on that green dot there. Now, when you're doing vibrato, you're doing this. So you're rocking from one side of the fingernail to the other side of the fingernail. So this is what you're doing. So essentially it's... So you're basically sounding like a police siren or an ambulance siren or something like that. So that is what you are doing. So if you slowed down vibrato... So this is the actual note in question. And then this is what the vibrato is doing. So when you're doing vibrato, it's almost ever so slightly playing the note above and the note below. But when you speed that up, it sounds nice. It sounds as vibrato should do. So this is why you don't want to be starting vibrato too soon until your intonation is very, very good, because as you're doing that, it's very easy for your finger to slip. Another reason is that when you come to put your note down, put your finger down on the note that you need to put it on, if your finger is ever so slightly going just behind the dot like this, for example, then you could be using your vibrato to ever so slightly shift that finger up, but that's not really a good way of doing things because you're not going to be accurate in the first place. So for those of you that are doing vibrato, make sure that your intonation is good. And the way you can test that is to just by doing some scales really, really slowly. Hopefully you can do them off by heart and you're not looking at a piece of music or looking at the scales on a sheet of music, so that you can concentrate on, you know, what have your eyes concentrate on what your fingers are doing here. Do it slowly and see where your fingers go down. And if they're not really quite accurate, then you want to maybe just be very, very careful with the vibrato, because that can, you know, you can use vibrato to kind of ever so slightly shift that note and cover up the fact that your note was actually out of tune in the first place. So you could be putting the notes down. Let me see if I can do an example of what I mean. I might not be able to show you what I mean, but so just, I don't know. So the note wasn't down correct. It's hard for me to do actually, to show you what I mean. The note wasn't down correctly in the first place, but I used vibrato to kind of shift it in position really quickly as soon as my ear heard that it wasn't quite accurate. That you don't want to be doing. You want to be able to have your fingers accurate in the first place. So just a tip there for those that are doing vibrato, just to make sure your intonation is bang on before you move on with vibrato too much. Okay. Can you do a video on how to reliably be in tune when playing pieces that have a flat key signature? Yes, I can probably do something like that. Let me have a think about that one. I think that's all the questions for now. So we've come to the end of the live. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in. If you've got any more questions, the chat will cease to be after I close this this live down. But if you've got any more questions, as usual, put them in the comments underneath and I will do my best to answer you. But hopefully this has given you a few tips on how to improve your intonation. Just very quickly summarize it. You want to make sure your violin is perfectly in tune. You can add in the dots with some of these, and the video on exactly how to do that is linked under this video, along with some links to where you can get these dots from. Use scales and arpeggios to help with your intonation, practicing them and anything else slowly and very deliberately, recording yourself, which is the part we all hate. And just as a final tidbit of information, just be careful with your vibrato if that is the next stage and something that you are working on. So you are all very welcome. I can see you all thanking me. So no, you're all very welcome. I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you this time next week in next week's live. Have a good week and I'll see you then. Bye.